The Democratic primary field gets just a little bit smaller as Eric Swalwell becomes the first major candidate to withdraw their candidacy. Welcome back to the campaign trail, everybody. My name is Jared, and today we'll be going through Eric Swalwell's campaign and what his withdrawal from the race means for the primary at large, as well as himself. I'll be doing a basic overview of what his campaign was, then I'll go over the factors that led to his withdrawal, who I think he will endorse, and finally, where does he go from here? With all that being said, let's get started. So first I'll do a basic overview as to what his campaign was. It all started on April 8th, 2019 and ended July 8th, 2019. Before running for president, Swalwell was a federal representative from California's 15th Congressional District, where he was most well known for his work on the House Intelligence Committee and his constant TV news appearances. His signature issue for his campaign was gun legislation, and to go along with that, his signature policy was a $15 billion plan to buy back and ban all weapons deemed to be assault weapons. Another major point of his campaign was the pressure he wanted to put on older politicians to let the younger generations have their shot at fixing the problems America faces. He even had a slogan for it.
Pass the torch and to pass the torch. 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 Pass the torch.
Anyway, the highest Swalwell polled nationally was 1% and his lowest was 0%. Now that I've given you a basic overview of what Swalwell's campaign was like, let's talk about the factors that led to him withdrawing from the race. The first one by far is the biggest reason, and that is he simply failed to gain any kind of traction, whether financially or polling wise. Like I said before, he never got above 1% in any national poll, and he did not meet the fundraising requirement for the debates, which is not asking much. Another reason his campaign faltered is that his main reason for running was derailed by the Mueller report. Before running, Swalwell was big into the Mueller investigation and the intelligence behind it. It was his biggest reason for being on so many news stations. He thought that his expertise in this investigation would help him gain traction in a crowded primary. However, when the Mueller report was released only 10 days after Swalwell's entry into the race, it took away a lot of the intrigue the populace had in the investigation, leaving Swalwell scrambling for another issue to run on, which he eventually decided would be gun legislation. After losing his first lane in the primary, Swalwell sought several others, but most of these had already been taken by multiple candidates or one major candidate. He could have been the California candidate, which has a massive amount of delegates in the primary, but nope, that was already taken by Kamala Harris. He could have been the young candidate, the millennial candidate. Nope, Pete Buttigieg beat him to that one. He could have been the gun legislation candidate. While he did have some more success here, clearly gun legislation is not one of the more pressing issues for Americans. He could have been the woke white guy candidate. Yeah, because we don't have any more of those in this primary. Another thing that made his campaign falter was the amount of awkward moments he had on the trail. It's not that he had more than a normal candidate would have, it's that his awkward moments turned him into a meme, the candidate who's trying too hard kind of deal. The best example, I believe, was when he was giving a stump speech and paused for the crowd to applaud what he just said, except nobody did. Here's what that looked like.
But I will always be real with you. I will be bold without the bold. My wife and I, we fight insurance companies.
Yeah, like I said. Another thing that hurt him was his debate performance. I went over his performance in my post-debate analysis video, but in short, Swalwell had a hard time making himself stand out from the crowd, and when he did, he came off as very whiny and untitled. The last thing that hindered his campaign was the rise of other candidates. Swalwell barely made it into the last debate. If Steve Bullock, another candidate, had one more poll giving him at least 1%, he would have been in the debates over Swalwell. Bullock later got the poll he needed and several others, putting him ahead of Swalwell when it came to earning a spot in the debate. The fact that at least two other major candidates are possibly going to join the race will all but guarantee that Swalwell will be stuck outside of the debates, giving him no platform to gain more voters. Overall, things could not get much worse for Swalwell in terms of positioning in this primary, which was probably one of the bigger reasons why he made the decision to withdraw. But enough about what has happened. We've covered what made his campaign end, let's look towards the future now. I'll cover that in two ways. First, I'll talk about who I think Swalwell will support behind now that he's out of the race, and then I'll talk about what position Swalwell should move on to. But like I said, let's talk about who I think he will endorse. I have two candidates in mind. the first of which is South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Swalwell could go for Buttigieg in order to show his support for younger politicians, as well as the fact that Swalwell and Buttigieg line up pretty well on most issues. However, the person I'm way more confident that he will endorse is Senator from California, Kamala Harris. Not only are both of them from California, but Harris explicitly stated during the debate that Swalwell's gun buyback program was a good idea. On top of that, Harris is young enough for Swalwell to say that he's continuing to support a younger generation of politicians. Add in the fact that Harris is already rising in the polls. Swalwell might want to hop on board that train early, especially if he's looking for a possible cabinet position. Speaking of which, where does Swalwell go from here? What does he do next? What position should he go for? Those are the big questions for him right now. The first thing he has to do before anything else in order to stay relevant is to win re-election in his congressional district. Already, Swalwell has a strong primary challenger, Aisha Wahab, who can easily pick on Swalwell's failed presidential campaign. Specifically, she could talk about how Swalwell clearly had his eyes set on for higher office and was leaving the people of his district behind. Swalwell needs to reconvince his voters that he is still the person who can best represent them. After that, he can maybe look elsewhere. If a Democrat wins the White House and Swalwell is looking to be a part of that administration in a cabinet position, he needs to win back his district, as no president is going to appoint someone who just lost their seat, especially if they lost in a primary. Speaking of cabinet positions, I don't really think that Swalwell fits any position there very well. However, I definitely think he could be considered for director of CIA or the FBI, given his background in intelligence. A quick disclaimer, I'm not saying he is the best candidate for these positions, I'm just saying he could be considered possibly. And with that, I think we can close the book on Eric Swalwell's 2020 candidacy for president. I'm not sure this really came as a shock to anybody with all the struggles he was having, from fundraising to lack of polling. I imagine more will follow his example and drop out, especially as the requirements for the debates continue to become more and more strenuous. So what do you guys think? Do you think Swalwell made the right decision? What do you think he'll do next? Who do you think will be the next person to drop out? Let me know down in the comments. With all that being said, remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more coverage of the 2020 election. My name is Jared, and I'll see you guys next time on the campaign trail.